it's not easy putting these conferences. A big hand to Hari and Chameli and the entire team. You guys have done a phenomenal job. So yeah, I am Sri from Powerhouse. We're a seed to Series A cross-border investor. We're a Singapore domiciled US dollar denominated fund. We invest in India, we invest in US. We've started investing in Singapore. At the end of the day, we essentially invest in the global diasporic Indian entrepreneur, right? If we can find an awesome entrepreneur anywhere in the world with a team in India, building in India, selling to the world, we'll get behind you. Thanks.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Arun from Arali Ventures. We are again a seed-focused or a seed stage B2B focused fund. SaaS is an important part of our portfolio. 30 to 40% of our investments are SaaS. We are an India fund, India AIF, but I mean we invest, like Sri said, very similar. Indian founders building for the globe, Indian founders building for India and Southeast Asia, all of these markets, right? So that's largely what we do. And yeah, seed stage is what we specialize in. We just do seed and nothing else. Maybe follow-ons into our own companies at a later stage, but beyond that, no.
Yeah. To start on with the questions, I wanted to start with the evaluation of companies at a 0 to 1 stage. The question comes in very from my experience of supporting companies get funded in SaaS Insider and everything. The point happens to be that a lot of funds do not actually come in so early. You want late revenue or they are filler funds. But you two have been exceptional on coming in way early, even at a pre-revenue stages and backing the companies as the first backer. And I would like to get your perspectives on how do you evaluate companies, especially at the 0 to 1 stages.
Sure. Loaded question. Let me just step back for a second. And, the way I define a startup is filled with uncertainty, right? There's tremendous uncertainty at the early stage. Needless to say, you guys all know this. You don't know where you don't know what your product looks like. You don't know where your customers are coming from. You don't know where funding is coming from. So there's a ton of tangible as well as intangible, a ton of qualitative, quantitative things you could measure, and then a whole bunch of things you cannot measure. So in that environment, we essentially dive in head first and helmet free, like Hari said. Evaluating at that stage is as much art as it is science. There's a bunch of things we look at as first check investors. We're invariably the first investor in all our companies in Fund 1 and Fund 2. Can we be in this marriage together for the next 7, 8, 9, 10 years, right? And essentially co-build with them for however long they want us on the cap table. So team, obviously, is number one. And then obviously we do market sizing, we do comparative analysis of transactions, comparative analysis of companies that are in similar spaces and sectors. So the most important thing I would say early on is having a founding team that has the wherewithal to duke it out and build for the long run, understand where you fit in with the rest of the ecosystem in the product line that you're building, and do it without complacency.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much one of the very important dimensions that we look at as well. Because there's nothing else sometimes to look at the stage that we invest in, right? We again investing really early, no revenues, a prototype. One thing that has worked for us predominantly is, besides the team, right, is try and understand how much the founding team is being able to think through the problem that they're trying to address. I don't want a solution per se. But if you're actually talking to me about what are the dimensions of the problem, what exactly is the problem, how does it manifest itself in an enterprise, what are the adjoining areas that contribute to this, and that is a big evaluation criteria for us, right? You can go back and say, this is a problem, but if you peel the layers, how good is the understanding of the actual problem? Because unlike typical consumer startups, right, where you're just dealing with one consumer, he likes it, maybe he'll purchase, right? Enterprise is a slightly more complex world. Their departments, their functions, there is, so you need to understand that. You need to understand the problem in the context of an enterprise thing. And that's something that we try and get to, right? And typically then the simple question is, how good is the team? Can it be built? Can you use technology to build, solve the problem, and how you distribute? But a lot of those are things that will change as you go on. But yeah, problem articulation, how well they understand it has been it's worked for us in the past. Right?
So this is also a very broad question, but I would like to hear your perspective on this. At a 0 to 1 stage, at an early stage, how do you pitch to an investors? And has this way changed, pre-2021 and how it is now? What would you advise to companies?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the pitching to investors is try and get through, this thing, right? Try and get through a reference, try and go back and try and get the attention of the investor in terms of what you're doing, right? Having said that, I know when I speak to a lot of startups, they say it's very difficult to reach you guys, right? Very difficult to go back and get time with some of you, because you should understand from a seed investor, we probably get hit by 400 startups every month, and that's the kind of volume that we and we are not large teams like the larger funds, right? So if the easiest way to reach is basically maybe write directly, but to me personally, if you're able to articulate a problem that you're trying to solve for, and a short email is good enough, right? You don't have to send a large deck. A short email, either through references, even direct. All of the seed investors are actually hungry for good deals, right? If you can cut to the clutter and go and explain, right? It's something that we would definitely look at. Right? From our business perspective, right? We don't want to miss that one deal that will be the really good deal. So it's rest assured we look at everything that comes in.
Yeah, to add to what Arun said, I think, if you can have clarity on the problem that you're solving, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have all the answers. No founder that comes to us for a seed check has all the answers. They might have some. But if you can have clarity on what exactly you're trying to fix, right? And that also can evolve over time. That gives us perspective on exactly what market you're tackling, right? And having understanding of competitors that you're going up against, whether it's legacy competitors or new age competitors. And there's tremendous overlap that happens across all the hundreds and hundreds of SaaS companies that are coming out. So if you can have clarity of where you fall and how you distinguish yourself from the rest of the crowd, that gives us greater comfort.
Yeah. One more point, right? It's also as typical venture investors, right? I'm guessing all of us will have prejudices, right? So, and it's very easy for us to go back and say, I see something, this is marketing tech, there's 150 players, right? And sometimes you got to break through that clutter into saying, okay, this is an opportunity here. And that is important, right? For us, also timing of the market. Why is the right time now compared to say 3 years ago or 3 years later? That these are, if you can get all of that it's very difficult to read decks actually. If you send a large deck and said, hey, look at a deck, right? You just click 3 slides, 4 slides there, then I would actually say a short mail with the problem and then with a deck actually much more useful in terms of getting, that's what I've seen with at least people are able to go back and write. I always, if it's an interesting mail, I go back and read it. Then I'll open the deck. Right?
So other than not just throwing in a deck, is there any other mistakes that you would tell startups to avoid while pitching to you?
Sure. We've had instances where, let's say, founders come on a call or come to the meeting, and the idea that they're presenting to us is not the idea that we read in the email, and we're like, are we in the right meeting? Right? Or, the CEO defers the conversation to somebody else, and they're trying to lead the conversation as opposed to the guy that actually with whom the buck stops, right? You'd expect that at least in the initial conversations they would lead the effort, or just housekeeping things like just making sure you're on time and making sure if it's on a Zoom that your network is working, your Wi-Fi is working, and simple things that only add to pressure if they don't come through, right? If suddenly your Wi-Fi is not working and you're trying to present, there's enough of a pressure cooker environment presenting. You don't need all these other things. You better address them ahead of time.
Yeah, and pitching to us, like you said, that's basic hygiene. But sometimes we get a lot of people trying to go back and say this is going back and answering questions where they seemingly don't have answers to, right? And seemingly the ecosystem also doesn't have answers to. So there is, and at a seed stage, we totally get it that you might not have answers, right? I'd rather have people come back and say, you know what, we don't have answers now, but we can figure it out, right? We have the capability to figure it out. Or these are dimensions of the problem that we need to figure out. This is what we have done, but we are not sure yet, right? Because largely from a seed investor, we are happy to go back and invest in companies which are experimenting. You don't, if you had all the answers, then you'll not be speaking to me, right? And you'll be speaking to later stage investors. You'll be looking to raise a much larger round. We recognize that. So sometimes I get saying, oh, I've got all of this figured out. I just need 500K to go and make this $1 billion company, and that doesn't work. So those are important aspects, right? We are okay, like seed investors, for you to not have answers. It's a hypothesis thing. We are investing in the team. We are investing in the idea. We are investing in what you're trying to go back and build. So that's important to know. I don't want projections which say I'm going to grow at 40% year on year and I'm going to hit $1 billion revenue or 100 million in 10 years. Obviously, so many things could go wrong. So that's pretty important. Yeah.
That's a great point, Arun. If I can just add a comment to that. A lot of young founders come to us and seek guidance, mentorship, and so forth. And whatever we have learned over the years, we try to impart to them. But the first thing we invariably tell them every single time is one thing. For instance, one thing I know is I don't know everything. If you can embrace that vulnerability. And going to his point of, don't pretend or don't assume that you have all the answers, right? If you can embrace that vulnerability, I think you'll be a stronger founder.
Yeah, that's a very important point. Yeah, we like for pitches to be more conversations, right? And that way you can get a feel for how people think, right? That's more important rather than saying I have all the answers. Right.
And with your experiences, right? So what are the key problems that you've seen from an investor side in all your portfolio companies that companies should avoid in the stage of 0 to 1? It's a broad question again, but coming from your experience of with your funds, you can give us your perspective to it.
Key problems. I think. First and foremost, I think the co-founders, if there's more than, we typically invest in, there's no hard rule, but we typically invest in companies with multiple founders, right? Because we think that sort of support system is important. It's absolutely critical for a company's survival and, for a company to thrive, that all the co-founders are on the same page. It sounds basic. It doesn't happen all the time. And that's where problems start, right? And we've seen this over the years in multiple companies. So yeah, ensuring that doesn't mean that you don't question one another or that it's all just, yes sir or no sir type engagement. At the end of the day, the broad vision, the broad mission, the day-to-day operational structures and processes and procedures, those should be in alignment. Otherwise, you're just infighting or trying to solve things that aren't going to help grow the business, right? So first and foremost that comes to mind is having absolute comfort and confidence in how your co-founders are, engaging with the business.
I would agree, right? I mean, that's one of our, we are okay with getting everything else wrong, the hypothesis wrong, the industry wrong, this thing wrong. But if the strong team it is a strong team and they're complementary and they are in it for the longer haul, right? Then there's still a chance that they will go back, pivot, and find something interesting. So that's basic, this thing. And the other thing is, sometimes it's difficult to go back and explain this when you're a startup, right? But there's a lot of times we get startups which say, okay, they're not sure how difficult this journey is, and they're not sure they want to play the long haul game, right? Which is something that we try and look for, because it's a very tough business, right? I mean, there's delayed gratification, if at all, at the end of say 6 years, 10 years, if at all, and so many things could go wrong, right? So that's one thing. And secondly, the other thing I'd like to say is, I mean, in our business, this is the only business that actually pays to get only 20% right, and you still be good in this business, right? So don't take a VC seed investor's word saying, he says something is wrong with you, don't take his word for it. He's right, he's wrong 80% of the time. And if he's wrong 80% of the time, he's a great investor. Right? So that's an important aspect for you to go back and think about, because most of the times, whatever a seed investor is telling you is giving you his perspective of what he thinks. You can still go back and maybe challenge him, but that shouldn't go back and affect what you're trying to do.
So, and I would like to see if anyone had any questions that you would want to ask us. Yeah.
Hi. My limited experience on this, but is that, as most of the companies in here will be US-focused, I think, SaaS companies selling from India to the US. And my experience on this has been that as a similar company, we have an India team and we sell over there. Raising money in the US is usually at a higher valuation than raising money in India for the same kind of business. And I'd like to understand why that might be when you approach domestic VCs versus US VCs for the same company.
Great question. I think to some extent, Indian VCs are more conservative than foreign VCs. I mean, to begin with, we operate in the riskiest asset class. Within that, we apply conservatism, right? But in terms of sort of numbers, right? Yes, you could find deals that are par 10 mil consistently in SaaS these days. In India, I don't know if you can do that in the US. Could be the same sort of variables. And part of it in the US could be FOMO, right? Like, we're for instance, we're part of the Y Combinator demo day thing, right? It's insane the way those prices keep going up day by day. I don't know how, and even our companies have gone through YC and we see it and we're like, man, this is crazy, right? So I think as the Indian market gains maturity, our valuations are also trending higher, generally speaking. We've been at this for 9 years now. When we first started investing in India, you could find, like, let's say companies out raising pre-seed of $250,000 or $500,000. You could find deals that are like par 5 mil, par 4 mil types, right? It's tough to do that now. So numbers have trended up, but the maturity of the founder has also gone up manifold. Maturity of Indian founders. The Indian startup ecosystem is only about 15 to 20 years old, as opposed to 70 or something years in the US. So it might not be a fair comparison.
Just one point, I totally agree, right? There's a demand-supply thing, right? You will get 4,500 listed venture capital funds in the US compared to, say 300, 400 here, right? So obviously there's a demand-supply thing. The other thing that typically Indian VCs probably look at, and this is a lens that we look at, is especially if you're a enterprise-focused SaaS startup building from here to the US, right? There's an added dimension of being able to scale a business cross-border, right? Whereas if you're a US company and you're in the US, I mean, there's no complexity. You can hire the right people, you can go back and execute there. And we've seen a lot of companies being able to build to some stage, but scaling in the US, scaling in other markets is always a challenge. And sometimes that plays a factor in valuations, but yeah, demand supply is a big issue as well.
Actually, just to add to that, one other great dimension with particularly SaaS companies emerging out of India or built by Indian founders from the diaspora is many of them tend to have back end in India, right? We've seen the myth of not being able to build SaaS businesses out of India busted over the last 8-9 years, right? So product, engineering, tech, historically that has had strong roots in India. Over time, even functions like sales, marketing, and so forth happens out of this region. When that's the case, you don't need to raise as much capital as you would. If you have a team of 50 or 100 people in India versus a team of 50 or 100 in Manhattan or Boston or Silicon Valley, we're talking of a factor of 4x the cost, right? So you don't need to raise as much if your team is based here but building for the world.
My point is that if the American investor knows that as well about the same company, but they will pay more.
Yeah, I mean, and
So the point is, that's what
That's actually a good point. For the last 6 months, I've been personally running a project in SaaS Insider, kind of a cross-border, investor founder matchmaking through SaaS Insider, and that's how I met Sri and Kshitij from Powerhouse. Because the thing is that Sri had flew down from SF for this conference, and it has worked out really well. The companies have been getting to we have a few more capitals all the way flying down from all over the world for this conference here right now. And see, they are ready, it just takes over time that for them to identify, maybe this year it would be 5 investors flying down from across the globe. And next year it's going to be, 25 or 20, or that could go up. And it's a factor of time, because from the points that they said, I had the opportunity of pitching my startups to both Arun and Sri. My first startup, Supercharge, I pitched it to Arun, and I was asked the questions he said. I was trying to answer all the questions that I didn't know the answer for. The second time, I had the clarity to tell Sri that, okay, no, I don't know the answer. No, so that maturity over time will come down to this market, and the globe will start looking into the Indian companies, because Whatfix or Incent, they've been cracking India to US sales, doing $1 million deals sitting out of HSR. 50 mil ARRs, and major sales happens out of India, contrary to enterprise happening in US. Enterprise sales happens in India for them. And market is changing, and just to point that. So we'll have to stop taking the questions in so that the session has to move to the next. But Arun and Sri will be here. If you want to just catch up with them, feel free to reach out to them anytime. Yeah, thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hari. Thanks, Sri. Yeah.